Hello, kiddies. This is chapter 8 of The Trumpet of the Swan. Love. When Lewis's father and mother discovered that Lewis was missing, they felt awful. No other young swan had disappeared from the lakes, only Lewis. Now the question arises, said the cob to his wife, whether or not I should go and look for our son. I am disinclined to leave these attractive lakes now in the fall of the year with winter coming on. In fact, I have been looking forward to this time of serenity and peace of the society of the other waterfall. I like life here. There's another little matter to consider. Your personal comfort, said his wife. Has it occurred to you that we have no idea in which direction Lewis went when he left? You don't know where he went. If you go out start looking for him, which way are you going to go? Well, said the cob, I think I would go south. What do you mean, said the swan? You haven't analyzed anything. And why did you pick south? There's a whole bunch of other directions. There's north and east and west. He could have gone anywhere. True, said the cob. And there's all those in-between directions that we don't know about. The directions a young swan could start off in are almost too numerous to think about. So it was decided that no search would be made. We'll just wait here and see what happens, said the cob. I'm sure Lewis will return in time. Well, months went by. Winter came to the Red Rocks lakes. The nights were long and cold and dark, and the days were short and bright and cold. Sometimes the wind blew, but the swans and geese and ducks were safe and happy. The warm springs that fed the lakes from underneath the water kept the ice from covering them, and there was always a nice place to paddle around. And there was plenty of food. And sometimes a man would arrive with a big bag of corn and spread the corn all over where the birds could get it. That was very nice. Spring followed winter and summer followed spring. A year went by and it was springtime again, and still no sign of Lewis. Then one morning, when Lewis's grown-up brothers were playing a game of water polo, one of them looked up and saw a swan approaching in the sky. "Cuckoo!" cried the cygnet. He rushed to his father and mother and said, "Look, look, look!" And all of the other waterfowl on the lake turned up and looked, and there was a swan circling in the sky. "It's Lewis," said the cob. "But what's that thing hanging around his neck by a string?" "Wait and see," said his wife. "Maybe he's bringing us a gift." Lewis looked down from the sky and spotted what looked like his family. When he was sure it was his family, he glided down into the lake and skidded to a stop. His mother rushed up and hugged him, and his father arched his neck gracefully and raised his wings in greeting. Everyone shouted, "Cuckoo, cuckoo," and welcome back, Lewis. His family was overjoyed. He had gone for a year and a half. He looked older and handsomer. His feathers were pure white now instead of a dirty gray. And hanging by a cord around his neck was a small slate. And attached to the slate by a piece of string was a white chalk pencil. When the family greetings were over, Lewis grabbed the chalk in his bill and wrote, "Hi there," on the slate, and held the slate out eagerly for everyone to see. The cob stared at it. The mother swan stared at it. The cygnets all stared at it. They just stared and stared. Words on a slate didn't mean anything to them. They couldn't read. None of them had even seen a slate before or a piece of chalk. Lewis's attempt to greet his family was a failure. He felt as though he had wasted a year and a half by going to school and learning to write. He was very disappointed, and of course he was unable to speak. The words on the slate were all he could offer by way of a greeting. Finally his father, the cob, spoke up. "Louis, my son," he began in a deep and resonant voice, "this is the day we have long awaited. The day of your return to our sanctuary in the Red Rock Lakes. No one can imagine the extent of our joy at seeing you again, when you have been gone for so long, in lands we have no idea, doing whatever. How good it is to see your face again. We hope you have enjoyed good health during your long absence in lands far away, but we don't know what you were up to." "You said that once already," said his wife. "You're repeating yourself. Louis must be tired after his trip, no matter where he's been or what he's been up to." "Very true," said the cob, "but I must prolong my welcoming remarks a bit longer, for my curiosity is aroused by that odd little object that Louis is wearing around his neck, and by the strange symbols he has placed upon it, by rubbing that white thing up and down and leaving those strange white marks." "Well," said Louis's mother, "we're all interested in it, naturally, but Louis can't explain it because he can't talk. So we'll just have to forget about it for the moment and let Louis take a bath and have some dinner." Everyone agreed this was a good idea. Louis swam to the shore, and he placed his slate and his chalk pencil under a bush, and he went and took a bath, which is not a hard thing to do for a swan. When he was through, he dipped the end of one wing in the water and sorrowfully rubbed out the words, "Hi there." Then he hung the slate around his neck again. It felt good to be home with his family, and his family had increased during the months he had spent with Sam Beaver at the school. There were now 6 new cygnets. Louis's father and mother had spent the summer on a trip to Canada, and while there they had nested and hatched 6 new little cygnets. And in the fall they'd all joined up in the Red Rocks Lakes of Montana. One day, soon after Louis's return, the grain man stopped with a sack of grain and gave the swans corn. When Louis saw him, he swam over. When the man threw the grain and the corn on the ground to feed the birds, Louis took off his slate and wrote, "Thank you very much." And he held the slate up to the man, who looked at it and was quite surprised. Here it is. He's holding it up. Let's see if I can show it to you. Look at that. That's quite the picture, eh? "Say," said the man, "you're quite a bird. Where did you learn to write?" Louis erased it with his wing, and he wrote on the slate, "At school." "School?" said the grain man. "What school?" "Public school," wrote Louis. "Mrs. Hammerbotham taught me." "Never heard of her," said the grain man, "but she must be a darn good teacher." "She sure is," wrote Louis. He was overjoyed to be carrying on a conversation with a stranger. He realized that even though the slate was no help with other birds, it was going to be a help with people, because people could read. This made him feel a whole lot better. Sam Beaver had given Louis the slate as a goodbye present when he left the ranch. Sam bought the slate and the chalk pencil with the money he had saved, and Louis decided he would always carry them with him, no matter where in the world he went. The grain man wondered whether he'd been dreaming, or if he had really seen a swan write words on a slate. He decided he'd better keep this to himself, or people he would thinking he was crazy in the head. For birds, spring is time to find a mate. The warm, sweet airs of spring stir strange feelings in young swans. The male swans begin to notice the females, and they show off in front of them. And the females begin to notice the males too, but they pretend they're not interested. They're all very funny. Louis felt so weird one day. He knew he must be in love, and he knew which bird he was in love with. Whenever he swam past her, he could feel his heart beat faster, and his mind was full of thoughts of love. He thought he'd never seen such a beautiful young female swan. She was a little smaller than the other ones, and she seemed to have a more graceful neck and a more attractive way about her than any of his other friends on the lake. Her name was, wait for it now, Serena. He wished he could do something to attract her attention. He wanted her for his mate, but he was unable to tell her because he still couldn't make a sound. So he swam in circles around her, and he pumped his neck up and down. He made a great show of diving and staying down to prove he could hold his breath longer than any other bird. But the little female paid no attention to Louis' antics. She pretended he didn't exist. When Louis's mother found out that Louis was courting a young female, she hid behind some bushes and watched what was going on. She could tell that he was in love by the way he acted, and she saw that he was having no success. Once, in desperation, Louis swam up to Serena and made a bow. His slate, as usual, was hanging around his neck, and taking the chalk in his mouth, he wrote, "I love you," on the slate, and he showed it to her. Well, she stared at it for a moment, and she swam away. Here's this one. Can we see what it says? Barely. She didn't know how to read, and although she rather liked the looks of the young swan, who had something hanging around his neck, she couldn't really get interested in a bird that was unable to say anything. A trumpeter swan that couldn't trumpet wasn't good as far as she was concerned. When Louis's mother saw this, she went to her husband, the cob. "I have news for you," she said. "Your son Louis is in love, and the swan of his choice, the female of his desiring, pays no attention to him. It's just as I predicted. Louis won't be able to get a mate because he has no voice. That snippety little female he's chasing after gives me a pain in the neck the way she acts. But just the same, I'm sorry for Louis. He thinks she's the greatest thing on the lake, and he can't say, 'Coco, I love you.' And that's what she's waiting to hear." "Why, this is terrible news," said the cob. "News of the most serious import. I know what it is like to be in love. Well do I remember how painful love can be, how exciting, and in the event of unsuccess, how disappointing. But I am Louis's father, and I'm not going to take this situation lying down. I shall act. Louis is a trumpeter swan, the noblest of all the wildfowl. He is gay and cheerful and strong and powerful, lusty and good and brave and handsome, reliable, trustworthy, a great flyer, a tremendous swimmer, fearless, patient, loyal, ambitious, desirous." "Just a minute," said his wife. "You don't need to tell me all these things. The point is, what are you going to do to help Louis get himself a mate?" "I'm leading up to that in my own graceful way," replied the cob. "You say what this young female wants is to hear Louis say, 'Coco, I love you?'" "That's right," said the mother swan. "Then she shall hear it," exclaimed the cob. "There are devices made by men, horns, trumpets, musical instruments of all sorts. These devices are capable of producing sounds similar to the wild sound of our trumpeting. I shall begin to search for such a device, and if I have to go to the ends of the earth to find a trumpet for our young son, I shall find it at last and bring it home to Louis." "Well, if I may make a suggestion," said his wife, "don't go to the ends of the earth. Go to Billings, Montana. It's nearer." "Very well, I will try Billings. I shall look for a trumpet in Billings. And now, here I go. There is no time to lose. Springtime doesn't last forever. Love is fleeting. Every minute counts. I'm leaving this instant for Billings, Montana, a great city teeming with life and with objects made by man. Goodbye, my love. I shall return." "What are you going to use for money?" asked his wife. "Trumpets cost money." "Leave that to me," said the cob. And with that he took off into the air, and he climbed steeply like a jet airplane, and then he leveled off, flying fast and high towards the northeast. The wife watched him until he was out of sight. "What a swan," she murmured. "I just hope he knows what he's doing." And that's the end of chapter 8.